The Victorian era was full of strict manners, dramatic fashion, and steam-powered progress. But it was also home to some incredibly weird customs that would seem downright bizarre today. Let's start with one of the most unsettling trends: post-mortem photography. In the 1800s, photography was still expensive and rare, so when a loved one passed away, families would sometimes take their first, and only, photo of the deceased after they had died. They dress up the body, pose it with family members, and even paint open eyes onto the photo afterward to make them appear alive. For many families, this was a way to preserve a memory, but by today's standards, it's a little more eerie. Another strange trend was mourning jewelry. Victorians took grief very seriously. So seriously, in fact, that they wore jewelry made with the hair of the deceased. Locks of hair were braided into bracelets, necklaces, and even rings. Some pieces even had tiny portraits surrounded by hair, and it wasn't considered creepy, it was sentimental. Victorians also had a habit of collecting hair. Hair art was actually a big thing. People made entire wreaths, wall hangings, and ornaments out of human hair, usually from family members. It wasn't just for mourning, it was a common form of home decor. The Victorian beauty standard was intense and often dangerous. Women wore corsets so tight they would faint from lack of air. Tiny waists were considered the height of elegance, even if it meant reshaping your internal organs. There were also crinolines, huge cage-like skirts made of steel or horsehair. They looked dramatic, but could catch fire easily or trap women in doorways. These fashion choices were high risk for the sake of high society. Victorian people were obsessed with death. It wasn't just post-mortem photos or mourning clothes. Entire rooms and homes were dedicated to mourning. Some families even kept the curtains drawn and mirrors covered for weeks or months after someone died. And if you thought seances and ghost stories were just fiction, think again. Spiritualism exploded in popularity during the Victorian period. People regularly held seances in their homes, trying to contact the dead through mediums. Some believed in ghosts so deeply they wrote detailed guides on how to properly greet a spirit if one appeared. Even Queen Victoria herself was into it. After Prince Albert died, she held seances to try and reach him. Victorians also had strange health trends. They believed that bad smells caused disease. This was known as the miasma theory. So, to stay healthy, they carried around little pomanders, filled with herbs or soaked with handkerchiefs with perfume to block out bad air. And while they avoided smells, they didn't avoid some very strange treatments. Arsenic, for example, was used as a beauty product. It was believed to brighten your skin, even though it was slowly poisoning people. They also drank medicinal tonics with ingredients like mercury, opium, cocaine, thinking that they'd cure everything from coughs to headaches. Victorian medicine was basically a guessing game with dangerous side effects. Another strange health habit: doctors believed too much excitement could damage a woman's mind or womb. So some women were diagnosed with hysteria, which was a catch-all term for anxiety, sadness, or even boredom. Treatments for hysteria included isolation, electric shock therapy, or even leeches. One of the most popular cures? Being told to rest in bed and avoid thinking too much. One popular form of entertainment was the freak show, where people with physical differences were put on display for crowds to stare at. It was deeply exploitative and uncomfortable by today's standards, but back then, it was marketed as family fun. Victorians also loved collecting oddities. Some had entire cabinets of curiosity filled with things like taxidermy animals, preserved body parts, and shrunken heads. Victorians also had odd ideas about childhood. Baby cages were hung out of apartment windows so that babies could get fresh air. The metal cages dangled several stories above the street, and parents thought that this was good for their health. Many families didn't raise their kids directly. Wealthy parents often hired nannies or governesses who lived with the family and took care of everything. Children were expected to be quiet, obedient, and seen only when requested. Victorian people feared being buried alive. It happened just enough to spark panic. Some coffins were built with bells, air tubes, or flags so the dead could signal for help. One man even patented a coffin with a little window and food compartment, just in case. Death, illness, and etiquette ruled the Victorian era, and their attempts to manage it led to some pretty weird stuff. Today, many of these practices seem morbid, dangerous, or downright bizarre, but back then, they were just part of life. The Victorians were fascinated by beauty, science, death, and status, and they went to some extreme lengths to show it. Their world was strict on the outside, but filled with strange and surprising quirks underneath. Like, comment, and subscribe for daily history and culture content.